Please. Hello, and welcome to our podcast, Just Read It, okay?
Hi, I'm M.
And I'm C.
And I'm Kay.
We're just a couple of 30-something ladies who love reading and talking about books. We already spend multiple hours every week talking about books with each other, so we thought we'd record it and share our thoughts with you. This is our first official podcast episode after the announcement earlier this month, last month, by the queen of female fantasy, Sarah J. Maas. We are doing a deep dive reread of two of her series, A Court of Thorns and Roses and Crescent City, all in preparation for books 6 and 7 to come out later this year and the beginning of next year. In this episode, we'll be discussing ACOTAR Book 1, chapters 1 through 8. So we are going to jump into a brief overview of what has happened. This entire series is from a single person's point of view. It's not third person. We don't jump around between different characters. It is primarily Feyre, who is our main character or our main female character. This is primarily from her point of view. So we start out with her hunting in the woods. It's snowing so that we know it is wintertime in the human realm. She is out farther in the woods than she usually is, or farther than she's supposed to be, and it is because she and her family ran out of food 2 days ago, and if she doesn't find something for them to eat, then they're going to starve. So we don't get her name in this first chapter, since it is from her perspective, and there is no other human interaction throughout the first chapter. We don't get her name until the second chapter when she comes home and sees her sisters, and they mention her name Feyre. But as she is out in the woods hunting, she does come across a wolf. She kind of goes back and forth with, is the wolf really a wolf, or is he a fae or a fairy who's just been turned into a wolf? She comes to a conclusion that at this point, this is all about survival. And she does kill the wolf. Right before she kills the wolf actually kills a deer. So she ends up being able to take the deer home for her family to eat. She skins the wolf and takes the skin back to her family. We get a lot of interactions between her two older sisters, and her father. We'll dig into that a little bit more when we talk about the characters. After we get interactions with them, having their first real meal in probably a good week or two at this point, we do get a trip into town where she sells both skins from the wolf and the deer. We get to see a mercenary who she sells them to. So we'll talk about her a little bit more when we discuss characters as well. And then later that night, as they're eating dinner, we do have a very large beast who bursts into their hovel. He is essentially demanding retribution for the killing of the wolf, because the wolf was really a fairy. The treaty that both the human and fae worlds have agreed upon years and years ago, which we'll get to that point, demands payment as life for a life. So in exchange for killing the wolf, Feyre has to go to the fairy lands called Prithian and live with a fairy, this giant beast man, for the rest of her life. On the way there, there's a couple of days travel. Feyre's assuming it's a couple days travel from her house to wherever she's going in the Fae realm. And because she keeps asking questions and annoying the beast, which is a theme that we will see multiple times with Feyre. She's very inquisitive. He actually puts her to sleep for the entire trip. One, so that she doesn't know where they are or where they're going, and two, so that she doesn't ask more questions. Once she gets there, she kind of wakes up at the estate. It's a gorgeous, sprawling estate in kind of perpetual spring. Flowers are always blooming, it's always beautiful. She gets taken pretty much right inside. We do meet another fairy, Lucian, who we'll talk about a little bit as well. But then she's just kind of whisked right upstairs and has the whole miscongeniality treatment, gets bathed, plucked, brushed, waxed, all of the stuff. She gets some warnings from the woman who is now going to be her maid. And then we get a couple short conversations between her and the two fae males that she'll be living with. And that's about all that happens in these chapters as far as the story. The characters themselves. So we do have Feyre, like I said, the whole book is from her point of view. She is the youngest of 3 sisters. She describes herself as being gangly. Her boots are frayed. They're too small. Everything pretty much that she's wearing is very well worn because they don't have the money to purchase any new clothing or update their clothing. They live in a very small, kind of rundown hovel, as Tamlin likes to call it, more of like a shack, just 2 rooms. She and her sisters share their own one bed. She does have golden brown hair, which is the same hair all 3 of the sisters have, is the golden brown hair. She talks about having the straight nose from her mother and a soft mouth from her father, but because she has not eaten a lot, she has very sharp, hollow cheeks, but her eyes are slightly up tilted, just like Nezda's and their mothers. Nezda is the oldest of the 3 sisters. Do not like Nezda whatsoever. She is 3 years older. Feyre describes her as being prone to crave anything someone else possessed. Again, she has the golden brown hair, but she has blue-gray eyes, and Feyre describes her as being born with a sneer on her face, and she looks most like their mother. Elaine is the other sister in the middle, so she is only a year older than Feyre. She is kind of ditzy, is the feeling that I get. Like, she's just in her own little world, really just cares about her garden and looking pretty, and outside of that, she just doesn't really think of anybody else. Also has the golden brown hair and brown eyes like their father. So it's interesting that Nezda has blue-gray eyes, which are not like the mother or the father, whereas Feyre's, oh no, I'm sorry, her eyes are like Nezda's and their mother's. Elaine's are like their father's. Then we have the father, who is a crippled. He doesn't do anything. Brown eyes, just like Elaine. He loves Elaine the most, at least from Feyre's perspective. And then we get a bunch of other side characters. Isaac Hale is actually the first name mentioned in the entire book. He is essentially Feyre's lover, or has been for the last 2 years. He's the eldest son of the only well-off farmer in the village. And then the other 2 prominent characters are the Beast, who bursts in, who ends up being Tamlin, one of the High Fae. In beast form, he has golden fur. He's the size of a horse with a feline body and a wolfish head, and has curled elk horn with black dagger-like claws. His description as a male is very similar in the sense that he has golden hair, very delicate pointed ears. However, his nose, cheeks, and brow is all covered by an exquisite golden mask embedded with emeralds shaped like whorls of leaves. Lucian is the other male character that we have. He has long red hair, one russet-colored eye. The other eye has a wicked scar running from his brow to his jaw, and he's missing the eye underneath. So in its place, he actually has a carved golden orb that moves. So, a little creepy. He is also wearing a mask. It is a bronze mask with a fox's features, and he is Tamlin's courtier and emissary. That was a lot of information. What do we want to talk about first? Anything in particular?
How Feyre sees herself compared to her siblings. I always found it interesting. And now that I'm going through a second pass with everything, how you see her as, oh, she's so strong. She's the one hanging everything. But for her, it's just she has to. There's no choice. There's nothing else. And I don't think that that hit me as hard until I went through my second pass with it. Because the first time reading, I just wanted to read it all, get the story, where this time I've been dissecting the characters more. And where I had the initial annoyance with the sisters the first time I read it, now I actually feel the frustration that Sarah was trying to get through with the writing through a second pass.
Yeah, I went into this reread, which is my 8th time rereading the series. I don't know. I've lost count at this point. But I went into it after watching her interview and how well, or how she talks about Nezda. I went into it thinking, okay, maybe I misjudged Nezda the first time around. Maybe she's not quite as bad as I remember her being, but she is.
Yeah.
Like, she is mean. And I think we see even, as we're reading through more of the book, that like all of Feyre's insecurities that she is overcoming throughout the book all stem from things that Nezda has said to her. All of them. So being an older sister myself of 3 girls, I can't fathom expecting my youngest sister to have to do anything like this. Like, there is no way. She would be my Elaine. Like, no, she's going to stay home and tend the plants and not do anything, and I will happily do everything else for her. So I can't comprehend Nezda's thought process in choosing to not do anything to help.
I'm the oldest of three, too. I forgot how much I despise Nessa's character. I reread it.
Right? Like, there is not a good thing about her at all in any part of this book so far. And like every step of the way, you know, when Tamlin comes in beast form, all Nezda's doing is protecting Elaine.
Yep.
When they go into town, all Nezda's doing is protecting Elaine. That's all she cares about is Elaine. And I don't know if it's just because Nezda also knows that Elaine's kind of ditzy and needs the protecting and Feyre doesn't. I don't know. Like I said, I just can't understand her thought process.
I wondered a bit if some of it played into the fact that, because we do get the passage that mentions that Feyre didn't get all of the mannerisms and all of the proper breeding because of how their life circumstances changed. I always wondered if maybe Nesda looks down on Feyre because she didn't get to go through all of the societal proper way of doing things in those early formative years. Maybe she feels like in a caste system she is lower than due to what she got to experience with their parents when her mom was still around.
Yeah, that's interesting because we do have Nezda calling her a wild or a half wild beast and telling her that she needs to go bathe because she smells terrible and she's acting like a peasant,
Mm.
And yeah, maybe it stems a little bit from that, but Nezda also hasn't done anything to try and help change that for Feyre.
Unless she wants something.
Exactly. She's only interested in helping when she wants something. And I did find it interesting that the only thing Nezda does is chop wood. That's the only thing she
Yeah.
helps with. Elaine doesn't help out with anything, but Nezda helps chop wood. Outside of that, Feyre does everything. We also have the mother, who I think is an interesting character because we don't see her at all, obviously, because she's been dead for multiple years. But we get Feyre's point of view of her. We get snippets of what she looks like just when Feyre's describing how she or her sisters look and how some of their traits came from their mother. But the biggest thing we get with Feyre's mother is that her mother on her deathbed made Feyre swear, not her sisters, not her father, made Feyre swear that she protect her family. And she actually, what are the words? She made a vow to her mother to stay together and look after them. So we don't know if it was the mother just made her vow that just because, or was it that her impending death had given her some clarity about the true nature of her children and her husband? And
Didn't
she's realized.
didn't Feyre's mom kind of give off, I don't want to say hatred towards Feyre, but she kind of, I wonder if that's where Nesta kind of, her mindset towards Feyre comes from, is from, because that's how the mom treated Feyre.
An
Yeah, that could
indifference,
be.
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kind of a cold shoulder. She was
Mm-hmm.
cold. Let's see. We do have some interactions between Feyre and her father, who we said was crippled. He can't do anything because of what happened in their past. He is not able to do much, and he chooses not to do much as well. But I think it's interesting that out of everything in the first 8 chapters, you know, there is zero hope that Feyre has in regards to her life. Like, her dream right now is, all I want is to get my sisters married and to have enough food to be able to not starve and enough time to be able to learn to paint. Like, that is the bare minimum of what she would like in her life. So there's no hope that she has. But when she talks to her father, he is the one who's always telling her, you know, let them keep this hope. Let her imagine a better life, a better world. And when Tamlin comes to take her away, you know, he pulls her aside and says, you were always too good for here, too good for us, too good for everyone. If you ever escape, ever convince them that you've paid the debt, don't return, don't ever come back. You go somewhere new and you make a name for yourself. So I feel like he's the only one through all of this section that's actually giving her something to live for. other than survival.
I don't think it really said it either, but I wonder if he was suffering from depression. If it maybe,
Probably.
yeah, as well as his disability and everything, but as to why he wouldn't really get up and help or anything.
Right.
Or even
Because I also.
shame.
Yeah,
Yep.
shame, yeah.
So, one of the interesting things throughout this book is Feyre talks about, or we have mention of the god, but it's never in a way where she knows who they are or what they are. She is always making comments about long forgotten gods or our world, where we'd forgotten the names of our gods. We mortals no longer kept gods to worship. And then Nesda and Elaine, when the beast came, they're praying to whatever long forgotten gods might still be skulking about. So there is no, if there is a god system in this book, we don't know what it is yet because we get no gods. Whereas in her other book series, we get some form of god. So I think it's interesting because we also get the children of the blessed, who are essentially fanatics who want to worship the Fae. They preach, to let the immortal light shine upon thee, and they pray and worship the high Fae, so they're not liked by everybody else. So that's the only form of religion that we've seen so far. The world. Let's talk about the world that they're in. So we know from the map in the very beginning of the book, because obviously that's the first thing as a reader we're going to go to, is the map. We know that this series takes place primarily on one large island or continent known as Prythian. Prythian is essentially the area above the wall. The wall separates the Fae or the fairies from the human. There is a very small sliver of the human realm below the wall. Everything above it is split up into 7 courts or territories, and they are ruled by 7 high lords. We know that Feyre's territory is too small to have a standing army, and it is not the only human section in this world. We actually get some description of the large, full main continent, if you want to call it that, where there is also a continued wall with Fae above and humans below. But it is a much larger section of humans. We also get a small island to the left, which is Hybern, which is all Fae, no humans whatsoever. So we do learn in this world there was a time when humans and Fae lived together, but humans were primarily slaves to the Fae or the fairies. There was a rebellion. The humans rebelled against their Fae overlords, which happened about 500 years ago. And to stop the blood and the rebellion, there were 6 mortal queens that crafted a treaty with the High Lords at that point. They created the treaty to stop the war and the rebellion, and it essentially said all the Fae and those creatures had to remain north of the wall, and all of the humans had to remain south of the wall. It's that treaty that Tamlin kind of incites when he comes to claim Feyre as payment for killing the wolf. It also, Tamlin talks about the only thing that the treaty actually bans the Fae from doing is enslaving the humans. It doesn't actually ban them from hurting humans. But outside of that, we don't get a whole lot of information on the treaty itself. Like Feyre, because she didn't have all of the schooling that she should have had, she doesn't know what the treaty was all about. She doesn't know what the specifics are. So because of that, we don't, as the reader, have those specifics either. And we know, because we've read the book already, that there is more to what's going on with Feyre going to Prythian. We won't jump into any of that yet because I'm sure there will be spoilers. But the magic system.
Metallic tang.
Yes. So we do start to get Feyre describing a smell as a metallic tang, and it is often associated with magic being used. So she smells it, when Tamlin puts her to sleep when they're heading north, and she smells it when they get to the Fae court. She's not quite sure why she smells it right then. but she does smell it consistently whenever we see magic present, magic being in use. I do think it's interesting when she first gets to the estate. She describes it as sprawled across rolling green land, veiled in roses and ivies, with balconies sprouting out, that everything generally very beautiful, which to me, I just think of Alice in Wonderland whenever it's described. Especially when you get inside and all the tiles are black and white tiles. I'm like, yes, Alice in Wonderland, totally. But she does describe the house as if it's sleeping or watching her, which I think is interesting because we know what comes in Nesda's book. So I'm not going to mention that, but I'm going to point it out now so that when we get to later books, we can come back and revisit. The Blight. The Blight is the other thing kind of similar to the treaty. We're not quite sure what it is about. The first time I read this book, I had zero idea what the Blight was. Really, it's just a curse on the land. I don't know why it's called the Blight, because to me that's confusing. But it is essentially a sickness in these lands. It has spread slowly and only affects magic. So we know it surged during a masquerade 49 years ago, and that Andrus, who was the sentry turned into a wolf, was sent over the wall to search for a cure. As of right now, there has been no progression in the last decade. But that's about all we know about the Blight. But it is something that's happening kind of in the background that Feyre has questions on, and no one is giving her answers to those questions. There is a ton of foreshadowing in these first 8 chapters, which I was a little surprised. Going back and rereading it for, like I said, the 8th time or whatever, there is a lot that I've picked up this time around. Very first page. Feyre is talking about Prythian and says, in regards to Prythian, where no mortals would dare to go, not unless they had a death wish. Literally dies at the end of the book. So foreshadowing. The children of the blessed, when she meets them in the market, they say one of them is describing a cousin that went to Prythian, saying that now she dwells in riches and comfort as a high phase bride, and so might you. Foreshadowing.
The eyes to the camera, though.
We get a description of creatures in a pond that Feyre walks past. A creature with long, spindly arms that could drag you deep, deep beneath the surface of a forgotten pond. And I also think it's interesting that at one point Feyre describes this place as being peaceful and calm, unless that was an illusion too. And we know that there is a huge glamour going on top of everything, so that Feyre can't actually see the majority of the people. And she can't see the beauty, like the true beauty, or hear everything. So, yes, foreshadowing that it is an actual illusion for everything. On top of that, I think it's also just foreshadowing in regards to Tamlin and Lucien are attempting to make it seem like nothing's going on. Like there's no blight or curse that happened 50 years ago. They're just living their lives and not letting her know that Tamlin's secretly trying to make her fall in love with him so that they can break the curse. Also, a big elaborate illusion. This part I loved. There is some foreshadowing in regards to Tamlin biting Feyre twice. The first time is when Tamlin comes in, to their hovel to collect her in beast form. She wonders how they'd feel around her throat. In that sense, it's, he's going to kill her, but still a little foreshadowing. And then Lucien at one point says, we're not going to bite, but then he smiles, implying that they do bite. And then the worst one of them all, in my opinion, is the multiple times that it is mentioned Feyre being free to do as she pleases. So we get it twice so far in these chapters, and we are going to get it more in the chapters to come. But when they first enter the estate and she mentions the food isn't safe for humans, Tam says, I'm not your jailer, the gates are open. And then Feyre's first time exploring the garden, she runs into Tamlin and says, I didn't realize I was under house arrest when he asks her where she's going. And he responds with, "Of course you're not under house arrest."
I caught that multiple times too. I was like, are you sure about that?
Right? Foreshadowing. Oh, we also get some mentions of the food in Prithian, that it tastes so good that any food from the human side would be more like ashes compared to it. And we know in later books that Farah describes it that way. Maybe it's not Farah. Somebody describes it that way later on to Nezda. And then when Nezda turns, she also understands that yes, human food now tastes like ash. Oh, I forgot about this one. When discussing the treaty with Tamlin, he states the wall is an inconvenience. If we cared to, we could shatter it and march through to kill you all. And when Feyre asks if he plans to destroy the wall, he says, "I have no interest in the mortal lands, though I can't speak for my kin." He literally says it at the beginning of book 1 that they're going to destroy the wall.
So good, though. Oh, so good.
It is, and obviously we're not too far into the book yet, so we're not starting to see too much of the relationship that's going to come between Feyre and Tamlin, but that's something I think I'm looking at as we do this reread, just to see how his circumstances are very similar to others. They have the same circumstances, and yet they have done more with what they've been given, or they've made different decisions versus Tamlin just kind of letting things go the way they have been going for years and not choosing to improve. We'll get to that later on. So, two things that we've seen a lot of people talk about in regards to fan theories and spoiler alerts, possible overlapping between different series is one, the Ironwood bed, which is like the only thing that Feyre's family actually takes from when they're wealthy to when they're poor. And it is a giant ironwood bed. It's where they're all born. It's where their mother dies. And what we know based on reading Throne of Glass is that ironwood is used to make the broomsticks for the witches that they fly around on. So could potentially be some fan theories in regards to that.
I mean,
The
if you
other,
add that, I was gonna say, I didn't think about it when we first talked about it initially, but that in addition to her mother's disposition toward her, kind of get some ties into how the matriarchy in the witches in the other series treat their kin. The aloof, the attitude, the mindset. It's an additional tie that could add in with the ironwood. And I honestly didn't even think about it till just now when
That's
you said
interesting.
that it snapped into place. So there's that there. Could almost fortify that theory a bit.
because we don't get the name of the mother or the father at this point. So we don't know what their lineage is like, other than, nope, that's later on in the chapter. We'll hold off on that. The other thing that I have seen a lot of fan theories on is it talks about after they've made it to this house that the father paid a traveling charlatan to engrave word marks etched around the threshold.
Mhm.
Carved the whirls and swirls and runes around the door and windows, muttered a few nonsense words. And we know that word marks are consistent in the Maas verse, especially around the threshold. So, do they have Fae ancestry in their line already? Do they have witch ancestry in their line? We don't know at this point. But now we have two instances that kind of tie it or have very similar things with Throne of Glass outside of the human fae living in the same type of world. We have lots of extra creatures, but none of them, based on the descriptions, none of them sound like anything that we've seen in the other series. The mercenary. We forgot to talk about the mercenary. So when Feyre goes to the village to sell her pelts, her skin, the mercenary is actually the one who buys them. She does end up paying more for them than they're worth, but her reasoning is someone once did the same for me and mine, and at a time when we needed it most. I figure it's time to repay what's due. And, excuse me, Feyre describes her as a mountain of a woman, thick, dark hair, chin length, tan face that seemed hewn of granite, black eyes, many shades of black with hints of brown glimmering, covered in weapons. Her voice is clipped with an accent that Feyre has never heard. She's roughly 20 to 30 years old. She warns Feyre, tells her not to go far into the woods again, not even close to where she was when she killed the wolf and a deer. She does talk about being attacked or fighting with a creature that did harm her, saying that it was had the strength of the Martax, which she warns Feyre about. The Martax they have the body of a bear, head like a lion, with 3 rows of teeth sharper than a shark. And it's brought up that they had recently shredded villagers in a nearby town and shredded them to ribbons. So when the mercenary is describing the creature that attacked her, she describes it as having the strength of the Martax, but its bite was full of poison. And it took her 2 months before she could get up and 4 months until she could walk. And she shows Feyre the tan, muscled forearm flecked with gruesome, twisted scars, and then a leg of tan skin and veins that were solid black, spiderwebbing and creeping like frost, as if poison is still in the veins. So we do know of a creature whose bite, specifically on the hand, almost killed someone, but someone was able to reverse the effects. So we've seen a very similar creature like this already in the first book of Throne of Glass, when Aelin Selena is in the tunnels underneath the castle and comes across the creature, the Ritterak, I think is what she calls it. It does bite her on the hand, and she comes back and essentially passes out in her own room, and that's where Nehemia finds her and is able to heal her in some manner. But Nehemia does mention that if she hadn't found her in time, that she would be dead. So we do have one creature that seems to be very similar in both worlds. And that creature doesn't actually originate in Throne of Glass world. It is pulled through a portal. Foreshadowing. Oh, goodness. That's all I have typed up in the 8 pages of stuff I had typed for this 8 chapters.
All right. So thanks for joining us for the review of the first 8 chapters. Join us next time when we dive a little bit further in. And if you haven't, just read it. Okay?